fabric stash seems to be growing by the day, but I don't have time to sew a big project, so today I'm going to show you how to make not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 super easy beginner friendly sewing projects that only take 10 minutes or less to make, and they're super great for using up leftover scraps. These DIYs are also great to sew and give as gifts or sell for a profit, as they're so quick and cheap to make, and you can bang out heaps of these in a few hours and the tiniest scrap of fabric, which is great if you're someone like me who is terrible at buying gifts. So without further ado, let's get into it. For the fabric box, cut 2 pieces of fabric that are 10 inches or 25 centimeters by 14 inches or 35 centimeters. Also, side note, sorry about how wrinkly my fabric is. The blue material just didn't want to straighten up even though I ironed it. Anyway, you also need to cut 1 piece of interfacing to the same measurements, so 10 inches or 25 centimeters by 14 inches or 35 centimeters. First up, get the bit of fabric you want to be on the outside of your box and iron the interfacing onto it, wrong sides together. The wrong side of the interfacing will be shiny and reflective, and the right side will be matte and dull. So yeah, just make sure you iron the wrong side of the interfacing down, as otherwise you could get glue all over your iron, and honestly there's nothing worse than having a sticky old iron. I've actually done that so many times it's not even funny, and it gets pretty gooped up, so best to avoid it because yeah, it's not the vibe. Okay, so once that's stuck down, fold the fabric in half like this. So fold it so the shorter ends meet and then sew down the side seams, and then repeat that for the other fabric panel. I'm using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but it doesn't really matter what seam allowance you use here because we won't be wearing it, so the measurements don't have to be perfect. Just make sure you use the same seam allowance throughout the project so your squares will fit inside each other later on. Then fold the pouch like this so the corner is pointing outwards. You kind of have to smush the fabric down so it lays flat on the interfaced one because it's pretty beefy, and I like to open up the seam allowance like this so it lays a bit flatter later on, and then I just pin it in place so it doesn't shift around. Okay, then measure 1.5 inches or about 4 centimeters from the tip of the point and mark a straight line with some chalk or a pin. Then repeat that for all the other corners, so you should have all 4 corners marked. Then sew along these corners and try to follow the lines we marked as best as possible, and also back tack at the start and end of all your seams. I mean, if you know how to use a sewing machine, you probably know that you should pretty much always back tack at the start and end of all your seams, but I'm just giving you little tips and tricks in case you forget, so yeah, that's what I'm doing here. Once that's sewn down, you can cut off the excess seam allowance. Sorry about the blurry video, my camera decided to go on holiday, but yeah, just trim off the excess seam allowance, leaving a smidge left so you don't cut through the stitches and they don't unravel. Okay, now for the satisfying bit. So to put it all together, turn the lining box inside out like this, and then put it inside the other box, so the right sides are kissing. Pin all along the top edge, matching up the side seams first, and then pin the rest of it together all the way around so they're fitting together evenly. If they're like my eyebrows and they're a bit more like distant cousins than twins, you can always ease the boxes together so they fit perfectly. Then sew all around the top edge and make sure to leave a section unsewn. About 2 to 3 inches should be plenty. Trim off all the excess seam allowance, and then using the hole we left open, turn the whole thing right sides out. This can be super fiddly, especially if you made your opening too small, so take your time and slowly ease it out so you don't break the stitches. If it's a fetal macroscomia and you don't think you can get it through, you can always open the hole a bit by carefully cutting more of the stitches. And then, like always when I'm turning something inside out, I like to get a pair of scissors or a pen or something pointy and use it to push the corners outwards so all the seams are laying nicely. To finish the box, fold the raw edges of the hole inward so it matches up with the seam allowance, and then top stitch around the entire box, sewing as straight as possible, as this will be seen on the end product. Then I'm giving it a quick iron because I think it's way easier to iron at the end, but you can of course iron as you go, and that's it. I don't know why, but I'm actually obsessed with these boxes. They look so professional and they're really great for organising your crafting hoard or your wardrobe. You can even play around with making different sizes and shapes to organise all your various things like your yarn, your belts, stationery, or literally anything you can think of. I also love the idea of giving someone a gift hamper or something in one of these handmade boxes. Be right back, I'm just going to go make one in every single colour. For the cord organiser, cut 2 pieces of fabric that are 2.5 inches or about 6 centimeters wide by 4.5 inches or about 12 centimeters long. Also cut 1 piece of interfacing to these same measurements. As you can see, we barely need any fabric at all for this project, so it's perfect if you want to use up all those annoying tiny scraps you don't know what to do with. First up, grab one of the fabric pieces and iron the interfacing to it, wrong sides together. I did the unthinkable and I cut my interfacing a little bit big, so it got a bit stuck to my iron, so make sure you cut it the right size or even smaller than your fabric panel. Once the interfacing and fabric are bonded together, fold this piece of fabric in quarters, so fold it in half and then half again, and then trim off one corner like this so it's a rounded rectangle. Place this rounded rectangle on top of the normal rectangle and sew them together all around the edges, leaving a section unsewn about 2 inches or 5 centimeters long, along one of the longer sides, so we can turn it right sides out later. I like to mark this with parallel pins, as otherwise I'll forget and sew around the entire thing, and I really don't feel like busting out my seam ripper for the second time today. Anyway, you're going to want to follow the rounded curve that we've just cut, so pivot the sewing machine foot around all the curves. You can cut the other bit of fabric to be curved as well before you sew them together if you want, but I'm bad at cutting things evenly and everything comes out more like long lost cousins, twice removed than twins, so this is my hack to make sure both the panels line up. Now they're sewn together, trim off the excess seam allowance and cut tiny notches into the curves of the fabric by cutting in little triangles like this. Make sure you're only cutting the fabric and not the stitches. Flip this oblong right sides out using the hole we left open earlier, and again, if it's too tricky to flip, you can always open up the hole a bit more by using a seam ripper to cut a few more stitches. I also like to use something pointy like a pair of scissors or a pen to push the seam out so all the curves lay flatter and more evenly. Just make sure you don't pop those seams. To finish off this DIY, fold the raw edges inward so they match up with the rest of the seam allowance and sew all around the perimeter of the oblong. Wow, look at those high school math terms coming in handy. I guess those 4 years of my life I'm never get back were worth it. But yeah, just sew around the entire outside edge. I like to use my presser foot as a guide so I know where to sew and how to sew evenly around, but if you're worried about it you can always draw the seam allowance in and then just follow that line. Lastly, to finish the cord organizer we need to add the closure method. I'm using these snaps, but you can use velcro or even a button and a buttonhole if that's all you have on hand. You can use any size snaps you like. I have heaps because I saw some at the thrift store and my Raven brain couldn't leave any behind, so I got a lot of different sizes to choose from, so I'm going with the big guns. To attach the snap, all you need to do is fold the fabric on top of itself like this, and then put a pin in roughly where you want the snap to go, through both layers of fabric. Then push the pin out of the way and mark all the sides of the fabric like this with a fabric pen or some chalk. Now before you start sewing the snaps on, I recommend you put them together like this so you can see what the right and the wrong sides of the snaps are, because they look pretty much the same and I've sewn them the wrong way around more times than I'd like to admit. Yes, I am a professional. Now all you need to do is sew it to the fabric with a needle and thread. I like to sew a few stitches into the fabric before sewing down the snap because I read once that it makes it more secure, and I don't know if that's true, but I've done it ever since because I trust those Pinterest mums more than I trust myself. Then just sew back and forth, going into these holes on the snap a few times all the way around, and once you feel it secure, sew a few more times for good measure and then tie up your thread. To sew the other side, just repeat these steps but on the other side of the fabric. Again, make sure you sew the snap the right way around because they look almost identical and it's super easy to mess up the sides. And then once that side's secure, tie a knot and you're done. I honestly feel so stupid that I haven't made these before. Like, where were these 4 years ago? They feel like magic. Are you sick of getting your cords lost? Are you sick of finding them in a tangled mess? Are you sick of your cords being more broken than your parents' marriage? Well, with the Cord Organizer 1000, you won't have to spend all evening unwinding them ever again. Say goodbye to wasted evenings and hello, free time. Bam, and your mess of cords are gone. Okay, enough with the TV infomercial. I'm just obsessed with them. They're so easy to make, they're so cute, and they'll finally let me have a clean bag without my cords getting all tangled up and broken. Win, win, win. To make the drawstring bag, cut 2 pieces of fabric that are 12 inches or 30 centimeters long by 9 inches or 23 centimeters wide. You'll also need to cut 2 pieces of ribbon that are 22 inches or 56 centimeters long. Firstly, you're going to want to lay the 2 pieces of fabric down, wrong sides together. Now at this point you should measure down from the longer end of the rectangle 2 inches or 5 centimeters and mark this point with some chalk or a pin. But did I do that? No. No, I did not. I guess I can't follow my own instructions, but I'll show you how I fix that later, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, if you're at this stage, please mark this point now. It'll save you a lot of hassle in the end. Anyway, now sew the fabric wrong sides together. Yes, you heard that right. Sew them wrong sides together along 3 of the side seams like this. We're sewing them wrong sides together because we're going to do a French seam later on, so it looks really good and all the seams will be pretty on the inside. Once that's sewn, trim off the excess seam allowance, leaving only a sliver so your stitches don't come undone. About half an inch or 1 centimeter is plenty. Fold the bag inside out and sew it along the 3 sides again, making sure to not sew the top 2 inches or 5 centimeters like I said before. You want to make sure you're catching the seam allowance inside while you're sewing the seam, so all the raw edges are hidden inside this little pocket of fabric. To make sure it's laying flat and the raw edges are pushed outwards and smoothed out as possible, I like to kind of roll the fabric edge in my hands like this. You can pin this all down before you get to the sewing machine if you find that easier, but I'm just feeling a bit risque today, so I'm just going to do it like this. I pretty much always do it like this actually, and I find it works really well and it looks really good in the end. Okay, so here's the point where I noticed my grave mistake, and I brought out my trusty seam ripper, so I just marked the 2 inches from the top with some chalk, and then I just seam ripped until that point, so it's a super easy fix. It is kind of annoying because we did the French seams, but it doesn't take that long, so it's not that big of a deal. If you're smarter than me and you didn't make this mistake, you can obviously skip this seam ripping step. Okay, so now that we're back on track, we need to hem this top bit. First up, where the mark we made is, clip the seam allowance like this so it's easier to work with. Make sure you don't cut through the stitches, just cut the seam allowance. Then repeat that for the other side. Now fold the raw edges inwards twice like this so the raw edges are contained, and pin it in place, and then repeat that for all the little flaps. So you should have 4 little hemmed flaps. Bring that over to the ye old sewing machine and sew these baby hems in place. Like with all the other seams in this video, make sure you back tack at the start and end of all your stitches. Once that's done, fold over the top of the bag about half an inch or 1.3 centimeters, and then fold it over again so the fold is hitting the chalk line we drew earlier like this. It should also match up with the notches we cut earlier. Pin this all down, and before you start sewing it, it's best to make sure your ribbon will fit inside the casing. Then sew all around the top like this. All that's left to do now is to add the ribbon. Insert the ribbon using a safety pin into one of the flaps, then thread the ribbon the whole way around, going through both flaps until it reaches the front again, so it's facing you. Then insert the other ribbon starting at the other end, so the other flap, going through both flaps and coming out the other side like this. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's pretty straightforward, so just follow along and it should look like this. Then tie the ribbon ends together so they don't come out, and you're finished. This is the perfect size bag to hold all your projects in process, which if you're like me, you need at least 5 more project bags. I love how I can keep all my things organized together for once, so I'm not losing something every 5 seconds, and this would also be great to put in a gift, or you can even make a couple of these bad boys and use them as reusable wrapping paper instead of having to throw away rolls and rolls of paper every single Christmas. So it's a little eco-friendly DIY for you. For the sunglasses case, cut one rectangle of fabric that's 8 inches or 25 centimeters by 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. You will also need a piece of ribbon or cord that's 16 inches or 14 centimeters long. I didn't have any ribbon, so I stole the cord from my old Mankey sunglass case, and it'll complete another life cycle in this new case. And don't worry, I didn't throw out the fabric. She went back into the fabric stash for another project. So yeah, no wonder I can never seem to get rid of this fabric cord. Okay, anyway, so firstly get the fabric panel and hem around all the edges. You can use an overlocker for this, but I'm too broke for that, so I'm just using a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine. Any of these stitches will work to hem the edges, but number 4 is my favourite, so that's what I'm going with. So yeah, just sew around the entire panel with a zigzag stitch so it's all hemmed. And sewing this seam took me about a minute, and that's the longest part of this DIY, so that's how you know this is going to be a quickie. Once that's done, fold the fabric panel in half lengthwise, so the folded measurement should be 4 inches or 10 centimeters by 9.5 inches or 24 centimeters. Then pin along the sides so they don't shift. I don't know what was going on with this fabric, but it was so stiff my pins wouldn't get through. I even tried my silk pins and my heavy duty thick pins, and it just wasn't working very well, so that's why I'm struggling so much here. Maybe I'm just weak, but I feel like this fabric was extra thick. I guess I wouldn't like to be stabbed over and over again either. Now measure down from the side and mark a line 1.5 inches or 3.8 centimeters, then mark another point 2 inches or 5 centimeters from the side seam. So you should have 2 lines like this. I like to put parallel pins in these lines as my fabric chalk is quite faint and it rubs off pretty easily, and then just sew all along that side, making sure to leave the section unsewn where the parallel pins are like this. So start at one end and sew down the side seam, and then when you get to the first pin, back tack and stop sewing. Start sewing again at the next pin and make sure to back tack at the start of the new line of stitches, then keep sewing all the way down until you reach the corner. Then lift your presser foot while your needle is still down and pivot 90 degrees so you can sew the other side. The last step is to make the casing, so open the side seam up like this so it lays flat, and then fold over the very top hem like this about ½ inch or 1.3 centimeters. Then fold the top over again about 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters and pin this down. At this point I gave up on using pins and changed to my sewing clips instead, but pins would probably work better for this step. Before sewing this down, make sure that the hole we made earlier is in the middle of the front panel like this, otherwise it won't work. Then sew right around the circumference of the pouch. This can be incredibly awkward because it's so small, so I find turning it right sides out and sewing it like this can be easier. Sorry about my fat hand being in the way. I hope you guys can kind of figure out what I'm doing, but just sew right around the circumference and then back tack when you finish sewing. To finish her off, grab a safety pin and attach it to the cord or the ribbon or whatever you're using, and then insert it into the case through the hole. I found this toggle thing in my stash, so I decided to add it to the ends of my cord to make it look even more fancy, but that's obviously optional. Then lastly, tie the cord together with the tight knot so they don't escape back into the fabric tunnel, and you're done. You know this one's a good DIY because my boyfriend has already stolen the yellow case from me, so you better believe it's a great gift. I think it would be really cute to give someone a pair of sunglasses in a homemade case, or you could even just make the case as a gift itself. I also love how you can sew this case to match literally anything. You could even make a matching set. I also love how practical this case is, and I found it's way better at keeping my sunglasses safe from all the scratches than those other shoddy cases you get for free with them. So I highly recommend. Well, after all that sewing, I don't think I even made a dent in my fabric scrap bag, but I hope you guys enjoyed these speedy DIYs nonetheless, and I hope it helped you out. If you guys want even more cute and easy sewing projects, I've made a few videos on that now, so I'll leave a link to a playlist of other super easy quick sewing projects. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye!